Welcome to Tony's Right. This is a video on choosing your concentration in your MFA program. And I'm going to go a little into my concentration and a little bit as to why. I do want to make a separate video for that, but essentially I am in an MFA program for creative writing and I chose poetry as my concentration. A little bit about why I did. I just felt like poetry was very impactful. Even if it was just a few lines, like a haiku, it could be very impactful, very thought-provoking. And I found that a lot of the stuff that I read as poetry that I stuck with has stuck with me for several years, even after reading it. And so I wanted to force myself to cut away a lot of the fat that I think prose kind of allows you to do, and challenge myself to make every line kind of thoughtful, every line push the envelope or push towards, the end of the poem. Like, I don't want any sagging, like, middle, so to speak. So I decided to choose poetry for that reason, and I just felt like what I had to say would also best fit poetry. Now, I'm interested in other areas of writing, some that may surprise people, but I'm interested in completing a degree in poetry, right? Like, I will be doing writing in other forms like flash fiction and stuff like that, but I wanted to concentrate specifically in poetry. So there's that. Now, when applying for an MFA, you need to know what you're going to be concentrating in. And it can change, but the reason why you got accepted was for a specific area of interest. And so you need to keep that in mind when you're applying. I would say maybe the best advice for someone who is very multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, would be to find a program that will allow you to do that. If not, your main thesis be multidisciplinary, like you're doing screenwriting and poetry, then like it'll allow you to take courses in two things. And I mean a significant amount of courses where you feel kind of satisfied and you feel like you're able to learn in both fields or multiple fields. If you're doing 3 or something like that, you won't be able to do every course in the program unless your program is like very small. You won't be able to do that. Like, I'll be able, my program is pretty small. It's only about 6 of us for the poetry side. It is 6 of us for the poetry side, but that's just the first year, right? The second years, third years, may have more, right? So it may be like 25, 30-ish of us and the entire program for poetry. But going back to what I was saying, you want programs that are going to be tailored to what you're interested in, right? And then have actual strengths. I would say if you want to do screenwriting, I wouldn't choose a program that's only poetry and fiction, right? Because you won't have an option to explore screenwriting. And there are programs that specifically do screenwriting. Now, whether or not you want to move to those places, whether or not you want to take up the courses there, that's your own thing. You may be better doing like an intensive, right? And you can check out the video of why not to do an MFA if you're interested. But when you apply, I talk with my hands a lot, so please. When you apply to a program, you have an area of interest in mind. You may not have an idea what your thesis is. You may not have an idea of where you're going to end up entirely outside of, being published, graduate, moving in the publishing, writing fields, things like that. But you do have an idea of what you want to study and what you want to concentrate your skill set in. Not that you won't have other skill sets, but what you want to concentrate your skill sets in. I decided to do poetry, like I said, for the reasons I mentioned. So you really need to get that together before you even apply, because you have to build a portfolio as well, right? So you have to build a portfolio. You have to come up with a certain amount of pages. Usually it's a certain, like a chapter maybe for prose, a few, 10, 15 pages of poetry for submission. You have to get these things together, right? Knowing your concentration helps a lot. So because you don't want to submit poetry, prose, but then you really want to do screenwriting, you really want to do microfic, you really want to do like some other genre, like you want to do like biographical writing, memoir writing, you know what I'm saying? Like you gotta have something that they're interested in. And you got to make sure that what you've written, what you've produced, is going to go in one of those categories. Unless you're multidisciplinary, and I would then look at the requirements to make sure that you're meeting them, and making sure that you aren't missing the mark, essentially, with them. So I would say choosing your concentration. I would say when it comes to like poetry, consider, I would say, if you're interested in poetry, consider whether or not you're interested in plot, longer plot structures, larger plot structures, and writing about that, because that may determine whether or not you want to do poetry. Like I personally, I feel like I have plots in my mind, but like they don't be thought through, so they are not thought through at all. And so, but I also lean to poetry because I feel like, yes, there's really long poems, there's poems that are like whole books, but you can be very impactful in like 3 lines as a poem. You can do it in microfiction, flash fiction, stuff like that too, but nanofiction things. But I feel like poetry is like particularly impactful because there's no plot that you have to come up at, and think of, right? You can be the observer, so to speak, a lot more in poetry, I find, than like prose, like fiction, stuff like that. If you're interested in biography, narrative, people telling their stories, telling the stories of groups, being an observer and writing about it, being the person involved writing about it, then you may want to consider like memoir writing, biographical writing, autobiographical writing, like things like that, like, well, memoir, because that may be more of what you're interested in, right? So that's another form that you can go for. I think if you're interested in writing with rhyme and rhythm and also without plot, then poetry would be more your thing. Like you can write things that rhyme, you can write things with a bounce a little bit. Not that prose can't do that, but I'm just saying poetry, a lot of it is about the lines, how they flow, how snazzy they can get, things like that. And then back to plot, you might be more interested in like writing, like prose, like fiction, nonfiction, stuff like that. So choosing your concentration is very important. You will be working towards some sort of project at the end of it. Whether or not you go ahead and like end up publishing or working in that concentration indefinitely is totally up to you. But if you're going to spend 2, 3, 4 years writing, then I would definitely consider, especially if you're just going into a program, I would make a concerted effort before you even begin to look at programs what you want to do. Because if you're all over the board, I am an all over the board type person. I have interest in like various different things. I got like 10 YouTube channels, child. But if you're interested in various things, you're gonna have to whittle that down because you need to come up with a thesis at the end of the program. To even start the program, you need to come up with a portfolio, and you just want to make it as polished as possible, And then other things to consider if you're interested in drama, theater, plays, stuff like that. You want to make sure that you have really good, tight work for that. So consider if you have if you wanted to do things more for the stage, if you wanted to do things more for film, if you like that visual aspect of things, then film writing, screenplay writing, I was gonna say theater writing, those may be more your lane. But I would say decide what you want to do before you look into the programs, because that alone will whittle away a lot of the programs in and of itself. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this. I will talk to you guys later. Take care. Bye.